I'm your cult boyfriend, and we're going to do another live stream today. Hopefully, we'll have a little bit of fun. We're going to talk about silent movies. I've actually had like a really boring week. Well, today was an extremely boring day at work. I'm a barista. It was somehow both insanely busy and insanely miserable. So, yeah, I'm trying to make sure this sounds okay. Give me one sec, everybody. Hope you guys have been all right. How have you guys been? I think it sounds fine. Okay. I see you guys. It's Coppola checking in. I appreciate your check-ins, Coppola. Hope you're doing well. Good afternoon. Amazing to see you again, your intrepid commentator. Oh, yeah, I hope everyone's had a decent week. It's Friday, and I think all I have planned for this stream is the silent movie ranking, because it is Friday night, everybody, and I have got some plans. Hello, first time catching one of these live, and the topic could not be more up my alley. That's awesome. That's awesome. Let me know what you think of my thoughts, and some of them might be a little wild, but I hope I have some insight to share with you guys. Let me show you what we're going to be dealing with for this entire stream. Boom. Go full screen for you for a second. These are like the first silent films that came to mind. You might think of a couple that are missing. Definitely let me know in the chat or in the comments on the replay of this live stream. Yeah, these are the first that came to mind, and I wanted to keep it to around 40 because, like I said, your cult boyfriend has some Friday night plans. But I'm really excited to talk about silent cinema. Silent movies are some of my favorite things in the world. I've always liked silent movies. I wish more cinephiles are at least more enthusiastic about silent movies, because silent film, they followed their own kind of rules. It was a different way of telling a story. There were different rules of pacing, of expression, of photography, of narrative, of like the purposes of even making a movie. And I'd like to point out that silent movies in the span of like narrative silent cinema in the span of what, like 25 years or something, came so far. And it's almost like they were reaching some sort of artistic zenith, and then the talkies came and kind of destroyed a lot of it, you know. In a large way, I think I would sympathize with Chaplin and some of the naysayers of the newfound technology. But silent cinema, I think, has some of the most beautiful cinema in the world. Like, looking at this list here of these movies that I selected, like the first 40 something movies that came to my mind, I don't see a whole lot of D-list movies at all. We're just talking about a period of film that was just beautiful, just gorgeous. And let's just get into the ranking here. Hopefully I can provide some insight along the way, or at least some entertainment. First up, we have Clara Bow with It, I believe 1927 movie. It's going straight up to the S's, okay? I love this movie. So there were a lot of different functions with silent movies. The fun thing about silent movies is that, like, the rules weren't necessarily written yet. They were being written. So what really is the point of it? The point of it is to is to celebrate Clara Bow, to celebrate her as this phenom, as this screen idol. There are so many things that were invented by the silent cinema, like even the idea of you turning something like making something cinematic completely alters it and entirely. And also film naturally, like, it has to objectify nearly everything that it films. That's one of the drawbacks of film, of this thing, this medium that we love so much. It objectifies every single thing that it photographs because it simply becomes an object within a frame. It's impossible to get around that. Clara Bow's It So like the it factor, right? She was the original it girl. She's probably what you think of when you think of flappers if you don't think of Betty Boop first. Clara Bow, I think, was probably one of the sexiest women who ever lived, and it is like a lovely celebration of that. Also, it's a lovely template of romantic comedies for years and years and years to come. The beats seem to have been written within that movie. I think it's super fascinating. What Clara Bow could do with a close up was extraordinary. And like the point of the movie was to have Clara Bow in a close up. Like that was the point. The point of the film It was to celebrate Clara Bow's it factor. All those different dimensions of her. You know, like things like screen idols were invented in the silent era. People like Rudolph Valentino Tino and Clara Bow and Greta Garbo. These idols who, if they hadn't been photographed or documented in some way, you never really would have believed they existed. And of course, when you film something, you change the nature of that thing. You make it larger than it is. And then certain people like Clara Bow can come around and enlarge it even further. I think that it's a phenomenal movie, and it's a great example of the unique nature of silent movies. Um, I love it so much. Yeah, Daniel, so much innovation in such a short time span. It's wild. It's absolutely wild. Um, just blows my mind because when we get to like the late 20s, right, with some of the more Muse pictures, uh, films today can hardly even compare. But right now, Clara Bow's at the top of the S with It. I think it's a phenomenal romantic comedy, and I am a simple, simple man, and if I get to gawk, look at Clara Bow for like an hour and 15 minutes, I'll call that an S tier movie without question. The Thief of Baghdad, Douglas Fairbanks is another screen idol who I love to death. I have videos about a lot of these films, or at least a lot of these people. I have a whole video about Clara Bow. I think I have another video about Douglas Fairbanks. I think Douglas Fairbanks was just a wonderful screen idol, and I think that, The Thief of Baghdad was the best film he was in. I would understand if you said The Mark of Zorro or something, but The Thief of Baghdad to me is, like, really inventive. It might be a little long, which is why I'd probably put it at B, but it's just it's mostly intoxicating to watch, and there's nothing more contagious than Douglas Fairbanks, than his grin, than his swashbuckling, mischievous, daring grin. I love, Douglas Fairbanks so much. Next up, we got The Life and Death of 9413, a Hollywood extra, a wonderful, kind of surrealist short film by Slavko Vorkapich and Robert Flory. I think it's an incredible kind of attack at the Hollywood system, at how kind of dehumanizing and soulless it is. It's very Kafka-esque. I think it's so damn good. I'd put that up at the A. Slavko Vorkapich and Robert Flory were both incredibly talented, and 9413, I think, is just a wild kind of film that you should definitely look out. Another great short surrealist film is the next one here, The Mysteries of the Chateau of Dice by Man Ray. I want to put that after Thief of Baghdad on the B tier. Man Ray is one of my favorite artists. You know, I can stare at one of his photographs for hours and just be kind of mystified by Kiki, right? I could just be like mystified by what he's trying to capture, the the erotic kind of mysteries of it. He's an incredible, gorgeous, complicated kind of artist. But he made a few surrealist short films, and The Mysteries of the House of Dice isn't his only one, but I think it's the one that's the most fascinating. I mean, obviously, there's no true narrative of which to speak because it's super experimental and surrealist, but there are striking images, and there are just these unavoidable, undeniable feelings throughout the film that I could liken to a great Man Ray portrait selection. It's definitely worth watching. Um, then The Passion of Joan of Arc. We all love The Passion of Joan of Arc, right? Um, It's gonna go to S. It might surprise people that it's behind Clara Bow's It, because that's the thing with silent movies, right? There are so many different purposes in making a silent movie. And I can say that, like, the idol worship of Clara Bow is, to me, more impressive than the, God, the devotional kind of, hyper emotional studies of Carl Theodor Dreyer, the religious ones. I can say that it's a bit, I can say that it's more powerful. I feel more in a Clara Bow smile, or a Clara Bow wink than I do even at Maria Falconetti's best emotional moments within The Passion of Joan of Arc. But it's beautiful. It's S tier. It's behind it. But I think you've heard enough people say that The Passion of Joan of Arc is one of the best films ever. I just love that anecdote most, where, like, they couldn't find the original print of the film, and I think they found it in a mental institution in, what, like, Sweden or some shit. Like, that's hilarious to me. That's a beautiful story. Silent movies are, they have all these beautiful, fun, kind of twisted stories of fate to them, that are really fun to kind of read about and get lost within and make larger than life, just like the people on the screen. But The Passion of Joan of Arc is a very striking film. I actually like both Vampire and Ordet more than I like The Passion of Joan of Arc, even just for drier films, but it's one of the very best silent movies, and I think that's a great example of how far silent movies came in such a short amount of time. Um, because some of those emotional recesses that, Maria Falconetti and Dreyer really went to in that film, are still kind of unexplored. Let's see what's going on here. Daniel says, "That's a very interesting take. I don't hear much about it these days. Gotta check it out." Um, I'm not entirely sure which movie you're talking about. If you're talking about it, it's on YouTube. One of the coolest things about silent movies is, since they're all like 100 years old, most of these movies are on YouTube. You can find most of these movies there. Yeah, there's like 3 different versions of it on YouTube. I can't stop. I've never been able to stop thinking about Clara Bow and that. It's incredible. Hold on. Because Clara Bow was amazing, right? She even had that tragic story because, as I said, like, screen idols were a relatively new creation, but the thing is that screen idols don't necessarily have good beginnings. In fact, they almost exclusively do not. Like her mother was a prostitute, and her first introduction to sexuality was a very kind of callous form of, like, of of um uh, of that kind of sexuality, right? And her father abused her in a million different ways. Her mother went schizophrenic, and then Clara Bow eventually did as well and became a shut-in, and that's how she died. But interestingly, I think that it's fun reading about her late in life. That this kind of aging sex symbol, and she was schizophrenic, but she was fascinated by the newcomer Marilyn Monroe, and it's fun reading about how fascinated the one of the original sex symbols was with a relatively new one. In fact, have you guys seen this? This is my. Let me show you something real quick. This is probably my favorite picture ever. um, it's pretty cool. Let me see if I can find it real quick. It's actually Marilyn Monroe as Clara Bow, which I think is just a beautiful gesture. She did a whole set of pictures, a whole photo shoot as Clara Bow. So this is Marilyn Monroe as Clara Bow, and I think it's such a powerful picture when we're talking about screen idols, right? I just see so much power in that. Love that picture to death. Now let's go back to the tier. Give me 1 second here. Ah, there we go. It's a bit too much RAM for my computer. My computer didn't know how to handle Marilyn Monroe as Clara Bow. It it almost crashed. I get it. I get it, computer. A little bit of a meltdown. Life and Death is a very cool short. I didn't even know about the budget, but it makes sense, right? I think they took from from German Expressionism, like, hyper literally, right? Because now that I'm thinking about it, and the sets must have just been cut out cardboard, like, the more surrealist parts of it. That's awesome. Yes, I believe we're all talking about The Passion of Joan of Arc. Yeah, Dreyer, absolute master. Francois Truffaut wrote a really great essay about him once called like The Whiteness of Dreyer, and he talks about the importance of the color white within his films, or the sensation of blindness, right? Of that kind of bright whiteness. And I always thought it was kind of interesting. Um, Kind of like whenever you see slow-mo in a Scorsese movie, it's like the presence of God or his ultimate absence, like the blinding light of Dreyer might mean the same thing. And that is cool. Glad I was able to share that picture with you guys. Haven't found too many people who appreciated it because that's like most people have forgotten who Clara Bow was. So if I show it to anyone, I have to go on a 15-minute diatribe about Clara Bow. But Gold Rush, Stone Cold masterpiece, S tier. What does that sound like a decent idea? Yeah, I mean, Charlie agrees. S tier, baby, all the way through. Um, there's more Chaplin on this list. I'll talk about him then. But next we have Pandora's Box, which I'll put just behind It. I think I'm like the simplest man in the world. It might stay at S for like that at the very top for a very long time. But Pandora's Box has always been one of my favorite films, and it was one of the very first silent films I actually looked for and went after because I don't know if you remember, maybe Criterion still does this, but like on their website, they had like people of note kind of pick their favorites from the collection and write a little blurb about them. And I think it was like Diablo Cody's, and her number one was Pandora's Box. I was like, I like Juno and Jennifer's Body. So I was like, what's Pandora's Box all about? I watched it and it blew my fucking mind. G.W. Pabst, I think is one of the most impressive silent directors of all time. Way more impressive than someone like Dreyer. What G.W. Pabst did with Pandora's Box was he turned a Muse picture into like a work of high art. There's so much complexity within Pandora's Box. There's so much sophistication and so much dread within it. And then there's also so much eroticism and sexiness, right? Because he found his Lulu. He found his Lulu in Louise Brooks, and he might be one of the greatest directors of actors ever because the way he handled the scenes with her, and just kind of liberating her, allowing her to be as Louise Brooks as she felt like, and she saw like the morbid truth in the material, and what GW Pabst saw in her was, I think, because it took him so long to find Lulu, and it took him so long to find um someone who like a flapper as beautiful as her, but also someone with like the capacity for real kind of carnage, and lustful carnage, right? Carnage of the heart. It's a phenomenal film, and I love that it's told in tableau. You see, Pandora's Box, I think, is one of the greatest silent films fucking ever made. And it's because of Louise Brooks that Anna Karina looks the way that she does within Vivre sa vie for Jean-Luc Godard. And that's also why Vivre sa vie is told the way that it is in Tableau. I think in exactly 12 different Tableau, right? And then when Quentin Tarantino made Pulp Fiction, the reason Uma Thurman looks like that is because of Anna Karina. And now you see like just the impact of silent film, and you can trace it all back to GW Pabst. And I think people like Godard and Tarantino, or at least Godard, saw something very powerful in his use of Louise Brooks within Pandora's Box. It's really one of the most powerful movies ever. I've seen it at least 20 or 30 times. It's one of the ones that I show to people who've never seen a silent movie, because I don't like just showing them a comedy or just showing them a horror movie, because like it's easy to show someone Chaplin or it's easy to show someone Nosferatu, but I don't want them to have like a limited understanding of what silent movies are, and I feel like everyone already knows what those movies are just by like osmosis just by living within the world as we know it. I want to show them Pandora's Box so that they get like the true sophistications of the genre, just how mad it can get and make you the viewer. It's so fucking cool. But speaking of comedies, great silent comedies, which there's nothing wrong with, I just feel like a lot of people limit themselves. At least people who aren't familiar with silent films limit themselves to comedies when they go exploring titles. But there's nothing wrong with comedies. Here's Safety Last, Harold Lloyd's film. Never been a huge Harold Lloyd fan. I'm gonna put it at the top of C. I don't hate Harold Lloyd at all. And there is artistry to his work for sure. And Safety Last is fucking iconic. Um, I just don't. C isn't a terrible place to be. I just don't feel much power from the film. Especially when we compare Lloyd, who I think has been not like reclaimed because he's always been loved, but now I see Lloyd in direct competition with people like Keaton and Chaplin, who I honestly believe he has absolutely no competition with. Like he can't compete with them, is what I'm saying. He's not nearly good enough to be in that discussion. But Safety Last was a very decent kind of film. The Phantom Carriage, I might upset some people too. I'll put that at the top of the C tier. Um, I think it is good and, eerie, and you can see where it would influence people like Bergman and stuff, right? You can pretty easily see that. But, I f it's a superficial criticism, but I think it's still valid. It doesn't really keep my attention. I think there's something wrong with the pacing of the movie. Um, but overall, it's still a quite a decent film, quite a decent film. And then we have a Propos Denise, put that behind Life and Death of a Hollywood Extra. Jean Vigo's first experimental short. It is insanity. I love it to death. It's amazing. It's so good. Um, check it out. Check it out. It's so good. Jean Vigo is one of the greatest about to call him one of the greatest anarchist filmmakers ever, but then I forgot he probably is the only actually anarchist filmmaker. Like he's the only actual anarchist filmmaker in the world. When you watch his films, you feel for brief moments that this film and these people within it are free to do literally anything that they want to do. And he wasn't alive for very long, but he left us with a treasure trove of work. So. The female lead's character, played by, Margot Robbie in Babylon, is inspired by Clara Bow. That's awesome. I never watched Babylon, but, like, people who I like a lot, or opinions who I respect really seem to enjoy it, and I do like that I guess Babylon is, divisive. It seems that, it's generating decent discourse. I should watch it so I can participate in the discourse. Um, that's fun. They still have that for Criterion. Oh, when the people pick the movies? Yeah, I thought that was really cool. It's also why I watched Hard Boiled for the first time because Patton Oswalt put it at number one. Like stupid shit like that, but it gets you into like a whole world of different filmmakers. Pandora's Box still feels very progressive and complex. Brooks is both a victim and unwitting perpetrator due to her magnetic presence. Exactly. Exactly. And how did Pabst do that back in like 28 or 29? Like, how did he do that? Because the film doesn't judge her. The film simply enjoys her presence. Like, Pabst doesn't judge her, and it's so weird. I don't know how he did that back then. There's not really a value judgment placed on her. There's an inherent one, like from the audience, and how much they love Louise Brooks as a presence and don't want anything bad to happen to her, or how like intimidated they feel because of her sexuality, even though like she's not actually threatening the audience, but you feel like she is because it's that kind of character. I don't know how Pabst did that. That's why he's one of the masters, because I still can't figure out exactly how he constructed Pandora's Box. Oh, yeah, if we're talking about Pandora's Box, definitely check it out. I think it's, so beautiful. Diary of a Lost Girl is on here, near the end. I'll talk briefly about that one as well. Out of Lloyd, Chaplin, and Keaton, Lloyd consistently makes me laugh the most. Fair enough. Fair enough, but the beauty of Chaplin is he didn't just make me laugh, right? Like, he made me feel introspective, he made me feel, like, not only comforted, but, like, he made me feel heartbroken at times. Someone like Chaplin, I think, understood the totality of the human experience and then the spectrum of human emotions and was able to get that out there. Keaton is just so fucking innovative, you know? I think Keaton makes me laugh the most out of the 3, but, great comedies, I think, have to have a little bit more than that, but nothing wrong with liking, Lloyd the most. Will always sadly be the 3rd best silent comedian, which, like, isn't that big of an insult. There are plenty other silent comedians beneath him, people like Harry Langdon, for instance, you know? You're a big fan of his in general? The Wind and A Man There Was, I have to watch more of his films. Because I think I explored a few of them back in the day, but I can't really remember too many of them, and The Phantom Carriage is the only one I watched more than once. Um, I gotta check him out more. So you would recommend The Wind and A Man There Was? I'll keep that in mind for sure. There's no doubt he's a director of skill. The Phantom Carriage just wasn't hitting as much as I wanted it to. Kind of like this next movie, Siegfried by Fritz Lang or Lang, however you wanna say it. I've seen it said both ways by reputable sources. Imma say Long, though. Um, I wasn't gonna include this originally, because I have Metropolis later, but, this one seems to be getting a fair amount of buzz in silent movie circles lately, and I'm not really sure why. Putting it at the end of C, I never really was a big fan of Siegfried. I mean, let me just be controversial right now. I was never a big fan of, like, Metropolis either. I'll put that at the top of C. Or maybe I was a fan of Metropolis when I hadn't seen a lot of silent movies, and then when I go back to watch it, I feel that and it also depends on which of the 50 fucking cuts you watched. I've watched several of them, including the one that incorporated, like, the missing reels they found in South America, another crazy, like, silent movie restoration story. I've There's so much I find wrong with Fritz Lang's silent movies. There's a lot of inventiveness for sure. There's a lot of imagery that stays with you for a very long time. I just don't like his storytelling mechanics. I don't think they're very compelling. I don't think the stories are very compelling. I think so far as German expressionism goes, he- he's not near the top. People like Robert Vine or like F.W. Murnau, I think were far better than and Fritz Lang, and I have a lot of issues with F.W. Murnau, for instance. Uh, Fritz Lang, I think, is a master filmmaker, but I think that his best films were his sound ones. I think M is one of the most extraordinary movies ever made. I think The Big Heat is great. Testament of Dr. Mabuse. Not into Metropolis, and I put Siegfried on here simply for the fact that I've been seeing a little bit of buzz, you know, and I don't it's had to rain on somebody's parade, I guess. I thought it was just so boring. I'm so sorry, everybody. That dragon in Siegfried was really cool. Fair enough. Fair enough. Maybe if I was like more into dragons, you know. Fair enough, though. But let's move on to Un Chien Andalusia. Put that at A behind a Pro Denise. Um, I almost think of this as a rite of passage movie. I feel like a lot of people know this movie, and I was first shown it when I was like 12, you know, because like, you know, a friend would get into something obscure, or at least like her eye being cut open or the cow's eye being cut open is one of the most iconic and unforgettable moments in all of cinema, not simply experimental silent cinema, but all of cinema. Of course, it's Salvador Dali and Luis Buñuel. I think it's fabulous, and like the purposes of making movies were so different back then. Like the purpose of making that movie was to kind of cause outrage, you know. was was to cause disgust. And I think it's one of the most, like, subversive films, one of the most successfully subversive films out there, 'cause I think it's inventive, and I think it's wild, and I think it's really fun, and, I mean, the Pixies wrote an entire song about it, so it's gotta be alright. And Man with a Movie Camera, put at the top of the B tier. I like the vibes of this movie a lot. Another experimental movie. There was so much experimentation going on, going on in silent cinema, because the rules weren't written yet, and then whatever rules were forged, people felt like they had to break them. You know, it was a less puritanical time in filmmaking in every conceivable way. And Man with a Camera is, yeah, I love the vibe so much. That's at B for a vibe check. It's kind of hypnotic and fun and chaotic. It's very nice. Let's get back to more narrative silent cinema with Flesh and the Devil. Mm. I'll put it at A tier as well, just above The Gold Rush. Flesh and the Devil, I think, is extraordinary. It's a wonderful romantic melodrama. I love melodrama, and silent movies capitalized on melodrama, basically invented melodrama. I love it. I love it. But what makes Flesh and the Devil an S tier movie is similar to why I think like It is an S tier movie, simply for the fact that Clara Bow was a transcendental woman. Flesh and the Devil features John Gilbert and Greta Garbo, and they're unbelievable together, otherworldly together. The chemistry between Gilbert and Garbo is, like, easily top 5 best chemistry, in film. Like, and their real life love story is twisted and tragic, full of, like, missed opportunities and, heat. It's so good. It's so good. Flesh and the Devil, just to watch, because we're just like Gilbert, we're just transfixed on Greta Garbo, who seems like this icy remote object, honestly, that we can never truly feel, but we want to penetrate, we want to understand what's going on there, but we can't quite reach her ever. And doing that through um, cinema in its early stages, to make an audience want to reach out and like understand a beautiful person, I think it is something wild, you know. Speaks to these like intrinsic feelings of loneliness, want, or like romantic curiosities of moviegoers. And to watch Gilbert and Garbo together, I think is just a phenomenal experience, one of a kind experience. Hands of Orlock, I'm gonna put at the end of the C tier. That's a Robert Vine movie, so he's pairing up with Conrad Veidt again. They made Cabinet of Dr. Caligari together. Uh, it's fun, it's fun. His hands are evil. It's fun, I guess. Um, it's a lesser German expressionist film, but still one that I don't see mentioned too often that probably should be. There are some really cool parts in it, and Conrad Veidt doing anything horrific, I think, is beautiful. Let's see what we got to say in the chat really quick. Metropolis was my gateway to silent films and remains one of my favorites, but I haven't rewatched it since getting into others. Yeah, I think I held it in high regard when I first got into silent movies, and the more time goes by, and the more silent movies I see, it keeps going down in favor with me. There have been weird cuts. There was like a cut that was circulating in the mid '90s or like early '80s. I don't fucking know. But the first cut I ever saw of it was tinted all sorts of different colors and had like Queen as like the music for it. And I thought it was just some strange bootleg, but it was like a widely circulated version of the movie. There's like 1,000 versions of these fucking movies. It's insane. The ants crawling out of the hand also remains stuck in my head. Yeah, that's a really good part of Unshan Andalusia for sure. S tier for me, but you're big into big city You're big into city symphonies in general. It's really good, man. B. That might be a little harsh, but I gotta stand by it. But I respect Man with the Camera. If I saw it on someone's S tier, I wouldn't judge at all. But now we have Buster Keaton with The General, which to me is a C tier movie. Yeah, there's not a whole lot to get into with Keaton. There's so much innovation, there's so much passion, there's so much entertainment, there's so much daring. And I think there's a fair amount of charisma. The General is one of his most known, or maybe it is his most known movie. And I still think it's exciting. I still think the gags work. I think the comedy still hits. It's just hard to find much in it to really interact with, unless you want to interact with the idea that I think originally he was playing a Union soldier, and he was told that he has to switch to a Confederate soldier because the audience won't find that sympathetic. And I think that has to do mostly with 50% of the audience were racist, or 50% of the audience wanted to root for, because he was told that Confederates are like the underdogs because they ultimately lose. So to watch this guy jump around like a maniac, knowing that he will ultimately lose like the overall war, he was told that that would make his character more sympathetic. But I think it speaks to a racism, to a racist element of culture at the time that silent films definitely exploited. I don't think that Buster Keaton necessarily did that, but I would say that's the only thing you can really interact with about the General is why was he a Confederate? That's like the only thing you can interact with, and it's still not that interesting. Docks of New York, a Joseph von Sternberg movie. Put that in the B tier as well, just behind Thief of Baghdad. I like Joseph von Sternberg. I don't think he got really fascinating though until he found Marlena Dietrich. Before that, like, he was good. There's no denying the skill there. It's just he hadn't found his muse, but it's still a good picture. That and Underworld are both pretty good. And then next, ladies and gentlemen, we have another S tier movie, Body and Soul. Put it I'll put it behind Flesh and the Devil. Body and Soul, a film by Oscar Michaud, a silent master. I love Body and Soul. I think it's provocative. I think it's an excellent example of early black cinema. I think that it is kind of dark and kind of wild in its own way. Like it's kind of crazy how kind of dark the melodrama got. But what's most interesting is the way that Oscar Michaud, like his exposition, honestly, the way that he decides to reveal certain things to the audience by literally like kind of spotlighting them within the frame, I think was an incredible addition to the language of cinema. Also, he played with linear storytelling within that as well. Um, the movie is nonlinear in a pretty large way, and I think that that's also really, really cool and counterintuitive at the time. The performances are great, and I think it's a pretty kind of emotional movie. But let's see here. Are you going to do the soundtrack? You know what? That's not a bad idea. If you have any ideas for more rankings, man, like I am here for them. Best movie soundtrack sounds like a totally should do kind of thing. Um, yeah. So thanks for the idea, Kawan. The General is fun, but yeah, not deep or anything for sure. Sternberg and Dietrich made some incredible films together. For sure, like Blue Angel is probably the best, right? And I feel so basic saying that, but it's so good. It's so good. It's undeniable. They were amazing. I really like Muse pictures. It's one of my weaknesses that I can't get beyond, I love a director and his muse. Your taste is based. Your comment is based, John. Thanks for stopping by. Really glad to see some Oscar me show. Within Our Gates, it's so good. I was trying not to overdo it with me show, so I only included Body and Soul, but Within Our Gates is really, really good. I like Body and Soul just a little bit more, I guess. But I think that that's a cool thing that's been happening within the last, probably, like, 8 years is that I see Oscar Micheaux mentioned so many times, like, more than Griffith, and I think that's good, and I think that he actually deserves most of the, um most of the praise that he receives. The innovation he did was extraordinary, and I still don't think has been properly compiled and, criticized. A Trip to the Moon. I don't think any silent list is, complete without Méliès, right? But still, I Méliès to me is like when we were doing the best horror directors tier, and I had like William Castle on there, and I had to put him at C just because Méliès is a magician, and his movies were like magic tricks. I think he's massively important to cinema. There's nothing bad with having him at the end of C, but it's 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 fun. It's a magic trick with unforgettable imagery. Maybe he provided some of the first unforgettable imagery to narrative cinema, right? I mean, I can say that much for him. Um, I think he was a very interesting showman. I think he was a showman more than a director, a magician more than a director, which is fine. It's just that's why I would associate him with William Castle. In that I can't put him anywhere above a C. I don't think he I don't think his composition is really something we can truly analyze, but we can all appreciate. Sunrise, F.W. Murnau's romantic film, goes at the very end of the S tier. I do love this movie. Um, it's an extremely controlled movie about romance, but I think that that is partly because um, Murnau's view of this couple was like, this is like the one thing that you can control within a universe that just seems to be all about entropy. Um, a universe that is spiraling out of your control, like that you can actually control the relationship that you're in. And I think that there's a great amount of tenderness within the film. There's some lovely photography. I love seeing German expressionism, kind of the techniques of it used within this romantic framework. I think it's a very heartbreaking kind of film. I genuinely love it. It's a masterpiece. There's no denying it at all. And now we get to possibly my favorite filmmaker of the silent age is King Vidor. This is we have 3 King Vidor movies on here because I think he made like genuinely 3 of the very best silent movies, starting with The Crowd. Put that above The Passion of Joan of Arc. The Crowd is phenomenal. Um, it makes for excellent kind of social commentary on the dehumanization of capitalism. It's an extremely engrossing film that's also told within Kafkaesque lines, but lends itself to melodrama so freely. So you never lose that kind of that newfound Hollywood touch. And King Vidor, I think, is he had an amazing sense of composition. His films feel just so dazzling to me. And something like The Crowd, I think, is a very confrontational movie that that investigates the downsides of the human condition, but specifically the human condition like under capitalism or within America at that time, uh, being this deals with alienation. And I think it's one of the best films to deal with alienation. The Crowd is beautiful, but The Big Parade is better. I'm gonna put The Big Parade right next to The Crowd, but above it. The Big Parade is 1925 World War One epic, starring John Gilbert and Renee Adoree. John Gilbert was amazing in that movie. He was so fucking good. I think it's one of the most sophisticated war films ever made. Still, um, the statements that Vidor makes within that movie, I think, are complicated. I think they're rich. I think that they are. Dripping with pathos. These characters are just heartbreaking stuff. Big Parade is it's just so excellently composed. It's a wonderful film. Glad for this. I clearly need to see more silent films. Yeah, I wasn't worried about doing this live stream, but I knew that silent movies, even within like cinephile communities, are it. attracts only a handful of people, really. That's why I was like, I think more cinephiles should get into silent movies in a bigger way. Um, yeah, really anything on the S and A tier, I can totally stand behind 100% with you watching them. Um, B and C, they have their issues, but yeah, I hope you see some more silent movies too. Méliès's bigger contributions to cinema than his films may be basically every special effect used until CGI. Yeah, yeah. I'm not gonna disagree with that at all. And he made huge contributions to film. It's just, tr Voyage to the Moon, Trip to the Moon would have been, it looks silly in the S tier. It's nowhere, can't compete with those. Yes, Big Parade is such an amazing film, so moving. Visceral is a great word for it. Visceral. You remember when Gilbert's having that close quarters, like, I think maybe it might even be like a knife or bayonet fight with the German soldiers that got into his trench, and the fight they have, and then the cigarette that they share. Like, that's some crazy sophisticated shit that I don't even see now. Like that kind of like the emotional guttural viscera of the Big Parade is extraordinary. Such a profound feeling of loss. It's beautifully composed. King Vidor is a complete master. He's amazing. And I haven't even gotten to his best film, to his best silent film yet. So that's cool. But Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, I'm gonna put at the top of the A tier. I don't think it's overrated. I don't think it's boring. I think it's amazing. Those sets, that's probably the best use of those kind of like painted sets, right? The German expressionism, I think is really about it's about angles, right? It's about jagged angles. It's about weirder than life kind of angles. I, if we're talking about it like within terms of like modality, within terms of architecture, it's about angles, jarring angles, unreal ones, alien ones. Uh, when you watch Caligari, you can see you can see that everything that Tim Burton was to become, essentially. Caligari, I think, is a gorgeous film. Another great Conrad Veidt performance. I think he was a powerhouse in silent films, especially within silent horror pictures. Robert Vine directed Caligari, and I think it's fucking insane. I think it's so good. I really do, and I think it's eerie. But most of all, I just think it's the architecture of the sets is intoxicating. I love the way the film looks. It's dripping with a style that is still being reproduced today. You know, it's a great film. And then Greed, Eric von Stroheim. I'm gonna put it above Pandora's Box, but behind it, Clara Bow, she's I'm still under Clara Bow's spell. She's still undefeated here. Greed is like the Schrodinger's cat of beautiful films, right? Because the only versions that exist are mutilated beyond the director's recognition. Now, the thing to that is the mutilated versions that exist are some of the most gorgeous things in the world. All right, and, like, that's a story, that's a great urban legend of the handful of people who saw the original version that was what? Somewhere between 6 and 9 hours long. I would have watched it because the mutilated versions that we have are so profound, so moving, so, like, soul-shattering. Pure cinema, you know, cinema, fucking 300 proof. It's incredible. But it's a Schrodinger's cat of movies because it both exists and doesn't exist. You know, like the Magnificent Ambersons, it both exists and doesn't exist. I think it's one of the greatest losses to cinema is the lost footage of Greed. Eric von Stroheim, I think, was a silent master. It's undisputable. Yeah, that cigarette sharing scene is amazing. It's incredible. It's like, "King Vidor, man, how did you do this? How did you get away with doing this?" You know? Because I feel like a lot of studio heads thought the audience was, like, really stupid, and I think it was daring in 1925 to do something that was kinda nuanced like that, um, because it doesn't tell you how to feel. That's the worst thing an intertitle or a title card could do within a silent movie is tell you how to feel rather than the visuals telling you how to feel. But that didn't happen. Like, how did King Vidor get away with that? And how did King Vidor know that the audience would know exactly what that moment was communicating? It's incredible. The full length version of Greed is one of the holy grails of cinema. Absolutely. Absolutely. I don't think there's any word on it even existing at all. I think it is all ruined. I think it is all gone. But my God, if they ever find it on that day, mark my words, um, I'll be celebrating my ass off. The TCM attempt to reconstruct the missing scenes is sad with all the film stills. It is, but at this point, that's my preferred cut, right? With all the film stills makes it look like half a fucking Ken Burns documentary. I get what you're saying. It sucks. And you're just left with like, oh my God, what was this? What happened? We lost something precious. Nosferatu. All right, I got complicated feelings about Nosferatu. Make no bones about it. It's a good film. It's going in the C tier. My bone to pick with Nosferatu is that I think it's pretty anti-Semitic, and I'm definitely not alone. And the Nazis thought it was pretty anti-Semitic too, and adopted a lot of its visuals for their propaganda. Um, Murnau wasn't a Nazi, but I think that like anti-Semitism was probably so ingrained in German culture that it was almost unavoidable. I think that when you look at Max Schreck as Nosferatu, he looks like a Jewish caricature. I honestly think it's unmistakable. Problem is, right, that the film is great. The film is very scary and it's very well made. I just think the film has caused a lot of damage and a lot of damage that I don't think has been recognized still, considering that what's his name? Robert Eggers is remaking it. And I don't think there's any self-awareness involved. It's still not common knowledge that like it was even viewed as anti-Semitic at the time. You know, it's a good movie, but you know, speaking as a Jew, it's kind of fucked up. So that's about it on Nosferatu, honestly. I think I got some legitimate problems with it, but my largest concern is that most people still don't see the like the true horror of the image. They just see a cool vampire, but the artist, but they didn't see a cool vampire back in the day. That's my point. And I think unmistakably it was a Jewish caricature. But I love The Artist by Michelle Hazanavicius. This might seem kind of awkward to people, but I'm gonna put it at the very end of the A tier. I thought it was charming, extraordinary, a great homage to a lot of the films that we're talking about today. Um, I love the camera work. I love the performances. I love the overall feeling of the film. And that's a film that I consider to be incredibly joyful, and it's a film that I think succeeds on all fronts. On everything that it tries to do, I find it successful. Um, it's a lovely movie. It's one of my favorite theater experiences because I think that the film was so compelling and entertaining that like the audience was completely quiet throughout. And there are scenes that do play with sound, not enough for me to call it a sound movie, but it plays with sound. Like it puts down a glass and you hear it, you know, slam on the table a little bit, and it's jarring. And then suddenly the silence becomes engulfing, swallowing you whole. It's this beautiful romantic comedy, and I do really, really love it. I actually didn't know about the anti-Semitism. That's a shame. I think the biggest issue with it is that I don't think it was I don't think it was truly deliberate on Murnau's part. I could be wrong. It seems to the anti-Semit the history of it is a complicated history. But like I said, I think that it's unmistakable, and that maybe anti-Semitism was so ingrained in German culture that like when you're doing it, you don't even realize that you're doing it. But people caught on like very quickly. You can say they misappropriated the image, but I don't see any other appropriate use for the image personally. But still a good movie, you know. That's the problem with silent movies, right? Silent movies are so powerful. Like, next up on our list is a film by Griffith, okay? So you should know what I'm about to say. Like, silent movies, it was not only a chance for us to really showcase and explore what we found attractive, people like Clara Bow and Louise Brooks, and Rudolph Valentino, people that we found attractive, and then that were so erotically mysterious to us. It wasn't just a place for us to sit and laugh together and find new ways to sympathize with each other based on the absurdity of the comedy that we're watching. It was also a place to showcase darker ideas, darker aspects of the human condition, and racism was a very large part of it, and still is a very large part of it. So, film, like the human experience, can be a very could be one that's wrought with racism. Now, I didn't include The Birth of a Nation on here on purpose because it's not even a good movie, so I actually don't have to include it, and that's cool. That's great. I completely support the erasure of The Birth of a Nation from film discussions. I don't even think it's good. If we're going to talk about Griffith, let's talk about a movie that's actually good, like Orphans of the Storm, starring the Gish sisters, and it's going up to be in front of The Thief of Baghdad. It is a pretty damn good movie. I love the Gish sisters. This is the closest we can get to director and muse. Lillian and Dorothy Gish and D.W. Griffith were a pretty interesting and decent pair. I think that Orphans of the Storm is probably his best film. It has that signature kind of nauseating Griffith melodrama, and it's only nauseating because it's so long and so composed, which is fine. Which is ultimately fine, because silent films were narrative cinema was figuring out how to be epic within an organized kind of framework, and Griffith did provide us with a lot of that organization. Griffith didn't provide us with anywhere close to as much innovation as he liked to take credit for. Like someone like Oscar Michaud had far much more innovative accomplishments under his belt than Griffith did. But Griffith will go and take credit for like intercuts, right? For the idea of montage, and he didn't actually invent any of these things. I think that like it'd be silly if we erased Griffith entirely, right? It'd be silly if we did that, but we can erase something like Birth of a Nation. It's not even fucking good. It's not even fucking good. So we can get rid of Birth of a Nation. Oh boy. It had to come up. It had to come up eventually. Your cult boyfriend will not shy away from Griffith discourse, but and there's another Griffith movie on this list too. That's one of the complicated things about dealing with silent movies, I think, is that there are certain figures you just have to talk about, and certain things like anti-Semitism and racism that you necessarily, like sadly, unfortunately, you have to bring them up. Because I guess we didn't know what cinema was for, or like what was outrageous and what wasn't. The innovations of The Birth of a Nation are also overstated, considering the Italian epics predating it, like Cabiria. I have Cabiria on here as well, and I was about to make fun of intolerance. We can do that right now. Actually, this is our big Griffith moment. We can be done with Griffith after this. When I put Griffith's intolerance, yeah, right next to Nosferatu. Those could be our problematic bays. Intolerance is masterfully bad and brilliantly rotten. There's a lot of anti-Semitism in that movie too. There's something wrong with every Griffith film, and I mean something like completely morally wrong and unforgivable. Intolerance, I think, is much better than Birth of a Nation, though. I'm cool with erasing Birth of a Nation and just talking about intolerance. I think that it's kind of wild. I still think it's narratively out there to have what 4 or 5 different storylines spanning thousands of years each, all trying to communicate the same human feeling, and that is intolerance. Um, and one of those stories being like Jesus Christ himself, like Jesus Christ is just one of four plots within this. It's like Cloud Atlas for 1916. It's kind of crazy, but there's so much insincerity within it. It's not a very genuine film because like also contrary to popular belief, people are like, the birth of a nation, it was a different time. No, the fuck it wasn't. People in 1915 thought that that was outrageous as well and tasteless. And then he made Intolerance in response to a massive amount of backlash he received. And so he tried to seem all like understanding and stuff. And it just comes off as very insincere. But I think it's kind of interesting. Okay, we're done. We're done with Griffith talk, everybody. We can have fun again with the man who laughs, going straight up to the A's. Um, Going to the top of the A's. I love The Man Who Laughs. Paul Lenny, German expressionist film made in America. Paul Lenny is a great German expressionist filmmaker. He also made Waxworks, also with Conrad Veidt. Conrad Veidt, man, we've talked about him quite a bit, and for good reason. The Man Who Laughs, I think, is one of the most hauntingly emotional stories ever. That I think what it's most known for is that Conrad Veidt's appearance in that film is where they derived or got the idea for the Joker from the Batman comics from. Um, but I think that just viewing it that way oddly limits the power of The Man Who Laughs, because I don't think of the Joker once when I'm watching that movie. I think of how my heart is being broken in a million different ways by this permanently disfigured and perpetually laughing clown. Uh, it's a gorgeous film. It's one of the crown jewels of Universal horror, and I think one of the films that really made Universal horror like what it was or what it was to become. I love that film a lot. Oh no, trust me. I've accepted that The Birth of a Nation is inextricably tied to racism like everything else in this country. I'm practically numb. I yeah. Yeah. But the fun thing about it is it's also a terrible movie and we don't actually ever have to talk about it. We can just not talk about it ever. I just didn't want to be I don't like I don't like praising Griffith that much. And often when I see like white boy cinephiles like talking about Griffith, it's in like an edgy kind of fucking way that denies the actual historical evidence that Griffith was a not extremely innovative and b not extremely good. Why can't he just be an okay filmmaker who literally made one of the most damaging and unimpressive films ever called Birth of a Nation? Already actually made Intolerance since he charged the critics of Birth of a Nation with being intolerant. That's kind of the same thing. He also wrote a pamphlet called The Rise and Fall of Free Speech in America. Oh man, I think Griffith would do amazingly in the current climate. But that's kind of the same thing. It's kind of what I meant. It was his response to the backlash he received from Birth of a Nation. So yeah, his response to the critics was to go, guys, I'm not only racist, I'm also anti Semitic. Like, good job, DW. Fucking idiot. It's just so far as silent masters go, we don't really have to ever bring him up, you know? And I hate like cinephiles who posture like they're being brave by bringing up D.W. Griffith. We don't actually ever have to talk about him. We can talk about Stroheim and Pabst and Vidor, and we can talk about Dreyer and Chaplin and Michaud and Paul Lenny and Fritz Lang. We can even talk about Murnau and Sternberg. There are so many people we can talk about who are far more impressive and did a lot more for the legacy of film. Wings. Wings. You know what? I actually am pretty partial to Wings. I'm gonna split up this Conrad Veidt double feature we had going in the A's. It's gonna go second spot on the A tier. I think Wings is pretty impressive. I think it's a pretty impressive blockbuster that that has a lot of Michael Bay in it. But more importantly, for your boy, for your cult boyfriend, we get Clara Bow being like smoking, being awesome and amazing to watch. So I it's equally possible I may have misspoke. That may have been equally possible, trust me. I look at some of these live streams, and I'm like, "Why the fuck did I just say that incredibly?" It's the opposite of what I meant to say, so I may have misspoke. Don't worry, Daniel. But, Wings is a lot of fun. Um, I'm a sucker for Clara Bow, and, I'm never gonna put don't put Baby in a corner, never putting her below an A tier. Now, Show People, here we go. This is the best King Vidor film. Show People is basically what The Artist was. Uh, Only The Artist was that in 2011 or whatever. Show People is a beautiful film about silent film when silent film was at its peak, starring Marion Davies, who I think is an incredibly underrated actress. She's hilarious in the film. I think Vidor's composition is second to none. I think the pathos is extraordinary. I think that it's kind of postmodern in a lot of very interesting ways because it plays with the framework of self-awareness. It plays with itself. It's one of the first films, one of the first Hollywood films that completely understood that it was a Hollywood film and called attention to its own frameworks. And by doing so, King Vidor was able to transcend a large part of cinema that hadn't been penetrated yet. And that was like a postmodern element to it. And that was a postmodern angle. And I think it's hilarious. I think it's very funny. I think it's the best kind of comedy that really explores the human condition and makes you feel more in touch with your fellow man after it. It's wild, but definitely more in tune with the medium that you're enjoying. I think it's a excellent silent film that has a very good idea of itself and understanding of its place within the medium. Then Battleship Potemkin. Let's get that to the very top of the A tier. It's one of the most interestingly put together films ever. The Odessa staircase sequence will never be bettered. Right, it will never be bettered. It's some of the best imagery I've ever seen. Eisenstein, there's a guy we can talk about when we wanna talk about montage, because there's a master of the montage. Um, you know, Incredible director, one of the absolute greats. We all know that. It's just, his narratives were always a little weak to me, but I'm not really sure if narrative was his primary focus. I think it was the viscera, um, the cinematic impact of his montages, which are unbelievable. So, Show People is a delight and also really accessible. Yeah, now that's one like even more accessible than Pandora's Box. Like if you are watching this video or you know somebody that you want to get interested in silent films, Show People for sure. I think it's an irresistible film and extremely accessible. You are so right, Daniel. Then The Kid. We're gonna get another Chaplin up on the S tier. Just a brilliant film. His first feature even, and just a master, a complete master. And then Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse, I'm gonna have to put really anywhere on the C tier. Uh it's much like why I like Clara Bow and but it I think is also like a pretty well made film. The Horsemen of the Apocalypse I don't think is a very well made film, but it's the film that launched the career of Rudolph Valentino, who is a mesmerizing dude to look at. He's incredible. He's startlingly attractive and completely commands the frame in a way that's very different from any of his contemporaries at the time, especially his male contemporaries at the time. Rudolph Valentino had such a mysterious presence to him, and such I think a hyper emotional one as well. I think Rudolph Valentino is one of the all-time great screen legends, and, sadly, like, I think that It by Clara Bow is a good movie, and so is Wings, so Clara Bow was fortunate enough to be in some good movies. Rudolph Valentino had one of the most unfortunate careers ever. He also had a tragic death, but I'm just talking about his films, like, he was never in a good movie. The Sheik and the Son of the Sheik are also not good. Like he was never in a truly great film. But every film he is in is elevated by his mere presence, and his mere presence is total, right? The fact that he's even in it, I think, because it explores that thing I was talking about with silent cinema, understanding that sometimes all you need to do is visually investigate and explore a person who is irresistible to the audience, and you end up getting some true physical poetry from it. Do a postmodern films ranking. I sure do say the word postmodern enough, you know. I sure do say that a lot. Play a drinking game every time I say it. So I already have nothing on the D tier. I'm not sure if we will have anything on the D tier, but Sherlock Jr. That's also gonna go on the C tier above The Docks of New York. That's my favorite Keaton movie. Once again, nothing like deep to say about it. I just think that I think the visuals and the gags are a bit more inventive. Um, I just like it more. That's why I included it. You know, I said basically all I can say about Keaton with The General already, but The General's not my favorite one, and I had to include my favorite Keaton. Keaton is an untouchable icon. You know, like I love him to death. Nothing wrong with Keaton, but he never made a film that was S tier, in my opinion. Cabiria, here we go. This can go above Orphans of the Storm on the B tier. It's really good. When the fuck did that come out? Like 1914 or something? Yeah, you would not have Intolerance without Cabiria. It's a massive epic. I love the sets. It's one of the first silent films to me that I think felt larger than the earth itself. So large. I love those opulent silent epics, right? Those the like because they were just starting out. They didn't know how much money to throw at something, so they threw like every dollar in the world at Cabiria. That was like an international project, and it was amazing. Yes, I watched Cabiria, and I think that it's larger than Planet Earth. What a massive film, and I think a pretty well made film as well. And like Daniel pointed out in the comments, pretty innovative, far more informative to film culture than than epics from other American directors would like you to think. Then Diary of a Lost Girl. I'm gonna put at the top of the B's. I think that G.W. Pabst felt the same way when he teamed up with Louise Brooks again for Diary of a Lost Girl after Pandora's Box. It's great. It's very great, but it's not special anymore. It's not magical anymore. Something was missing. And I wish I could read some information from that time period. I should read like the Louise Brooks biography, her autobiography, I believe. I should read that and see what was really happening there, because I feel like Pabst tried to capture lightning in a bottle again, and he couldn't necessarily do it. Something is lacking in Diary of a Lost Girl when compared to Pandora's Box, and it hurts the film in a myriad of ways. Being B tier is not bad, you know. It's with great company. You know, I still think it's a pretty striking and great film. I do think it's a great movie. It's just that it will always be compared to Pandora's Box. They're linked forever. You can't break the chain, and I think it pales in comparison to it. And maybe if Pandora's Box didn't exist, Diary of a Lost Girl would be A tier, because I wouldn't know what that pairing could truly do together, you know? Nothing against Diary of a Lost Girl, again. It's a wonderful film. It's just some of the magical components were gone, and you feel that vacancy. The Penalty, put that in the C tier, above Intolerance. You know what? Above Nosferatu as well. It's my favorite Lon Chaney movie. Um, movie about like revenge, and it's morbid and it's grotesque, and I think it features Lon Chaney's most compelling performance, if you ask me. Um, I think it's kind of deranged and confrontational. Then we have Haxan, however you want to say it. Doesn't matter how you say it. It goes at the end of the B tier. I think it's a wicked little movie. Well, big movie. I think it's a wicked film. Some of Keaton's shorts were so hilarious. The High Sign might be my favorite Keaton film in general. Have to refresh my memory on what that one was. Um, what's the one where he's like building a house or something, and then like the house falls on him, and he's standing perfectly framed, so that he goes through like the window at the top. You know what I'm talking about. It's one of the most famous images in cinema. I just can't remember what movie that was from. It's really cool though. Let's do musical tier rankings. Let's do it. Let's sing Cabaret and Rent songs. No, that's not a bad idea. We could totally do that. I liked Sherlock Jr. It was good. Steamboat Bill Jr. All right. All right. I have to refresh my memory on Keaton. He has a decent body of work. I remember you having some kind words for him in Chaplin and Limelight, but I believe that was sound. Yeah, it was. But it was Limelight's great, you know. And I don't think I've been unkind to Keaton. I just don't think he's a Chaplin. Look at this guy. Look at this guy right here. Now this is the moment of truth. I'm sorry, Clara. But our boy Charlie Chaplin's gonna have to reign supreme today. City Lights is one of my 3 favorite movies ever. Um, I think it's filmmaking at its best, and it was made with a um, wonderfully sensitive edge to it, because he made City Lights to express everything that words cannot. Because it came out in 1931, right? When talkies were at their most implosive and their most intrusive. He wanted to make a film that words can't describe, that words can't necessarily do justice to, and that's exactly what he did. That's exactly what he did. Words can't describe the city. The words can't describe the beauty of City Lights, and that's exactly the point of it. I love it. Was it 1 week? Let's figure this out together. We all know what I'm talking about, right? With the house falling. I think it is Steamboat Bill Jr. Hold on a second, guys. Yeah, I mean, this has to be it. It said Steamboat Bill Jr. Yeah, this was awesome. Yeah, his gags were incredible. Like, this is an extraordinary moment of comedic cinema, but like, I'm more impressed with it as a stunt than as like proper physical poetry, right? That's amazing. That shit right there is awesome. Maybe there's more power in it than I'm giving it credit for. But there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. That's what our silent movie tier list is. It should speak to the strength of the medium, of the art form that I don't have any movie in the D section, you know? It should speak to how powerful these films truly were and how unique they really were. Talkies, like, even in modern films, um, they can't compare to these. These were a completely different kind of cinematic or visual language. This is a completely different language of films. I think that silent films are so different, so far removed emotionally and erotically and cinematically, you know, from talkies that they're almost a different they're a different form, they're a different medium. You know, cinema could be large enough to include different practices altogether. I love it. But I don't think that's a bad list. Uh, top 3 or top 5, I think this is a good top 5. My The top 5 silent films of all time, according to your cult boyfriend, is, City Lights, It, Greed, Show People, and Pandora's Box. I think that's pretty good. I don't think we're gonna get any better than that. In both movies, a house falls on him. In 1 week, he just built the house himself. Alright. Hey, if the joke ain't broke, you know, keep doing it, I guess. Alright. Back to here. Yeah, that was fun. Um, hopefully, if you were here on, the live stream itself, first of all, thank you for being here live. I always appreciate you guys, even if you only stopped in for a few minutes. If you're watching on the playback, either way, I hope you found some good silent movies to watch, maybe some you hadn't heard of before. Maybe you were interested in silent movies and, didn't really know where to start. Well, I got a whole S tier for you to start. Um, Glad you included so many diverse and interesting films in your ranking. Man, I was concerned it was too basic because it's like I think it is pretty it's less American focused than I thought it'd be, to be honest. I had a I had a decent selection there. It wasn't deliberate or anything. Those are just the first 40 silent movies I thought of, and one of the very first things I think of when I think of silent movies is Clara Bow. Everyone should watch some Clara Bow. Yeah, man, one of the sexiest women who ever lived. She's one of the reasons film exists and is as popular as it is today, I swear to God. One of a kind, extraordinary. Love her to death. Strikingly modern still. Those close-ups in it, like, it's still so strikingly modern, or, that's probably not even the right phrasing, it's just, eternal. She has an eternal cinematic power and appeal. What she was able to do, it's incredible. Unbelievable stuff. Hey, I'm just glad you participated in the stream. No big deal. Without you, I wouldn't have looked up the clip, and we wouldn't have watched it together. So, we still got something good out of that. But, yeah, I'm probably gonna end it here soon. I know it was a slightly shorter stream, than the other ones, but, hey, it's Friday night. Papa's got plans. I've got drinks to drinks. I got drinks to drinks. Maybe I've already drank enough, actually. There's something pure about silent films, I agree, for sure. Something pure that if I was more cynical, I would say that, like, talkies and technology has diluted and continued to dilute because it wasn't just the advancement of sound, right, that Chaplin found so disagreeable. It was technology, because that's how he would make, like, Modern Times later. That's his main criticism is technology. So, like, it's almost like these advancements in technology within cinema have kind of alienated the viewer from the pureness that was silent movies, like the more advancements that are made technologically through cinema, the more alienated and um disassociated the audience actually feels with the product. That's at least a theory. If I was more cynical, I'd pursue that as an actual theory, but that's definitely one thing to think about. um and I think Chaplin would obviously agree. Silent movies had a unique power that you really can't get back. Yeah, man, I smile thinking about some of those movies. I smile thinking about, Clara Bow and, Charlie Chaplin. Silent movies. At least I didn't pull a gag on you and pretended I was muted for a while. Maybe you're all playing a trick on me. Maybe I've been muted this whole time, and you guys just thought it was part of the offbeat nature of your cult boyfriend. But mm, yeah, I have drinks to drink. I have alcohol to drink, ladies and gentlemen, and I got people to try to talk to. So hope you guys have fun tonight. Go have yourselves a nice Friday. I don't work tomorrow, so I'm gonna go all out. Joining live was really fun. I'll try to catch more of these. Awesome. I loved having you here. Hopefully we have more topics that you're interested in. I got a few good suggestions in this stream as well. Musicals and soundtracks and maybe some postmodern movies, which I think would mostly be comprised of 90s American movies and 60s French ones. So but yeah, tonight I'm gonna let my inner flapper go wild. Gonna go crazy tonight. But stay safe out there. Thank you so much for joining. Have a good night, everybody in the chat. Um, yeah, try to watch a silent movie this weekend if you can. It's definitely worth celebrating old cinema.